Hello, welcome to a special edition of Storytime with Scott Voss. What's special about it? I'm in a different chair. I'm actually in Florida. If you look out the window, you'll see just endless oceans. That's a lie. Anyway, we're still reading the Graveyard Gazette. This is chapter 5, and we'll begin. Carrie moved with a serene, floating motion at work that night. It was 3 a.m. as he shut down his station and headed to the break room. He searched the fridge for his brown bag, stuffed with a hastily assembled sandwich and whatever else he could find in his pantry that was edible. He was crunching down a week-out-of-date bag of corn nuts when he pulled out his phone and smiled. He had a new text from an unknown number that read, "I didn't want to get you written up for talking on the phone, so I texted you instead. This is my new burner phone." She ended it with a smiling emoji. She'd sent the text at 2 a.m. and he wondered if it was really a burner, considering where she would have found a place that would give her a new phone and number at that time. Carrie was typing up his reply when he heard, "What's got you giggling like a schoolgirl?" It was Johnny Bennett, sitting down at the stained round table across from Carrie. "Sale at Forever 21? "Oh, hey," said Carrie. "No, nothing, just a stupid video. What's up with you?" He tucked the phone in his pocket, not wanting to discuss Angela or their encounter with Johnny that night, or maybe any night. "Same shit, different night." Johnny flipped a plastic pepper shaker in front of him, trying to get it to land upright and failing. "Man, can you believe the Cubs pitching this year?" He took a bite out of his own sandwich and continued while he chewed. "Sure as shit somebody will spoil it and tell us they're all on roids, but hopefully they'll give us till the end of the year." "Yeah. Enjoy it while you can." Carrie hoped his reply would suffice, as his baseball knowledge, especially of non-local teams, was really limited. Michelle walked in, laughing with Bruce until she saw Johnny. She stopped, staring at him silently. Johnny looked back for a second before looking away. "You're the bitch who did it, aren't you?" Michelle said. "Did what?" Johnny slid the pepper shaker from one hand to the other. "I was here eating with Carrie the whole time." Michelle slapped her name badge down, and there was a strip of whiteout tape covering up the L in her name and leaving only Mitch. Johnny snorted, trying to hold back a laugh, but failed. "I'm sorry, it was so goddamn funny and too hard to resist. You left it at your station when you went to take a piss." "I got that," she said. "I also heard that's your nickname for me when I'm not around." Johnny looked shocked. "Mitch? Hey, fellas, would I ever?" Bruce cut him off. "Don't bring us into this, Johnny." "No," said Michelle. "It's okay. I've called him worse than that when he's not around." "Hey," said Johnny. "But I get it," she continued, peeling the tape off her name badge and sticking it to Johnny's shirt. "He's got to use a guy's name because he knows I'm stronger and doesn't want to admit it." "Now, just wait a minute there." Johnny slammed the pepper shaker down and made a loud clicking sound in the break room. "I admit to calling you Mitch behind your back, but everyone here knows damn well who's stronger." He looked to Bruce and Carrie for confirmation, but they just shrugged. "Oh, come on." "How about a challenge?" Bruce had a big smile. "Mud wrestling? Maybe we could raise some money for charity. I bet people would pay to watch her kick your ass." Carrie groaned. "I think I'd pay for you not to do that." "Arm wrestling?" said Bruce. "I'll do that," said Johnny. "Let's go right now." Michelle pulled up a chair to the lunch table. Johnny put his hands up. "My break's about up. Plus, you need to train for this or you could get hurt." "Oh, please don't hurt me, you big strong man," Michelle laughed. Johnny grabbed the rest of his sandwich and stood up, heading for the break room door. "I'll go easy on you, but when I win, you gotta put the tape back on." She nodded. "Works for me, but when I win, you've gotta put my nickname for you on your badge." "What's your nickname for me?" Johnny had a look of fear and confusion. "You'll find out. Or you won't if you're going to win anyway, right?" "Right," he agreed. "Friday. At lunch." He stuck out his hand. Michelle nodded but didn't meet his hand. "Deal, but I ain't shaking that. I haven't begun training yet." "Ha ha," Johnny stepped out of the door. Carrie pulled his phone out to reply to Angela's text when he remembered what time it was. Surely she'd be asleep by now. Then he texted her anyway. "You'll make a good secret agent one day. Hope I don't wake you with this." She replied within a minute. "I guess so. You didn't wake me. I'm a bit wired from earlier. I don't usually drink coffee that late." Carrie replied. Well, thanks for picking it up. Aren't you working in the morning? It took a couple minutes, but then he received another text. No, fall break. Carrie considered letting it end there and then had a thought. What are you doing around breakfast time? Barnyard was usually the last of the table at Harry's. That morning he had one side of the booth to himself. You see Care Bear in the parking lot? Asked Johnny. Carrie? No, said Bruce. I thought he'd beat me for sure. He say anything to you? Johnny asked Michelle. No, maybe he was just tired. He said he hadn't slept much yesterday. She peeled the menu open with a slurping sound from a pool of maple syrup holding the pages together. There were a few strings left, pulled tight between the pages when she dropped it back on the table and slid it to the edge. What the hell am I doing anyway? I know what's on the menu. I'm calling him. Johnny stuck his phone in the middle of the table, hitting Carrie's number and putting it on speaker. It rang 5 times before his voicemail picked up. This is Carrie. Leave a message. Hey, you bastard, said Johnny. We're all here waiting on you. I'm eating your bacon again. You paying for it. How about we arm wrestle for it, said Michelle. Shut up. Johnny turned back to the phone. She just can't wait to get beat by me. You better get your ass down here before we do it without you. Hell, if that's what we're doing, said Bruce, I'll get in on this too. I'll take both your skinny asses for his bacon. A few minutes later, Carrie was listening to the voicemail on the side of the road, laughing while he looked around for Angela's Honda to come into view. It was good to be missed, but he'd have to find out who ate his bacon later. He had to clear something up first. An insane idea took root in his head, and he was afraid this woman he had just met the previous night was the only one he trusted to share it with. He saw a car approaching and hoped to God that it was her. He didn't want to explain what he was doing to the police. The car slowed down, pulled into a church parking lot across the street. Angela emerged with her hands on her hips and her head tilted. A graveyard? I mean, wasn't our first conversation morbid enough? Carrie crossed the road to meet her at their car. He'd been rehearsing his lines on the way, but now his tongue felt heavy. He started. This is gonna sound weird, but just hear me out. Okay, you all right? I'm not sure. Listen, 2 days ago, I stopped here because I almost got in a car wreck, and a family of possums died, and... Wait, what? So I got out to check on them and found this newspaper. He held up the dew-covered paper. Well, probably not this one, but a paper. And you know Dan Dodgeman? Angela looked perplexed. He might sound familiar, but Carrie, are you okay? What are we doing here? Coach Dan Dodgeman was in this paper. He shook the paper for effect, and some of the dew droplets sprayed them both. Sorry, Dan Dodgeman was in this paper that morning that I stopped. The headline was that he was hit by an 18-wheeler and died. I didn't make much of it then, but when I got home that night and saw it on the news... He paused for effect. Right, said Angela. That's generally how it goes. No, Carrie spoke louder than he meant to and took a breath when he saw Angela jump. Sorry, but no. He died that night. That night? The news report was one of those breaking stories, like it just happened. But I read about it in the paper that morning, like 7 a.m. The news at 10 was acting like it had just happened. Carrie, she put a hand on his trembling arm. That's just how news sells itself. Okay, forget that one. The next morning, yesterday morning, there was another headline. He composed himself while looking at her. It was you. What? What do you mean? I wasn't in the paper. But you were. Maybe only this paper. He shook it again, and she snatched it out of his hand, rubbing dew from her face with her sleeve. Stop shaking it. She looked at the folded-up paper in the plastic bag. I'm in this? No, Carrie shook his head. That's not you on the cover this time, but yesterday you were. Oh yeah? Is that how you came and found me on that cliff? The paper told you to do it? No, he crossed his hands in front of him. It's just a coincidence, but it did say your body was found in Lake Danner. Did it now? Angela put her hands on her hips. And how do I know you're not just making that up because of last night? Carrie paced in front of her car, then turned and pointed at her. Your art! It was a picture of an octopuses or something. Angela paused. Squids. But I put them in a lot of my paintings. This is getting creepy. She was slowly slinking back to her car door, her hand on the handle. Maybe this was a bad idea. No, please, Carrie held up his hands. I'm sorry, it's weird for me too, but you have to believe me. I'm not some psycho stalker. I really never saw you before last night. Besides in the paper, you mean? Well, and you just happened to be up on the cliffs behind me. You just happened to know about my paintings. She pulled the handle and climbed in with one quick motion, slamming the door and locking it. Carrie went to the window with his hands up. Angela, please, I'm not making this shit up. It's driving me crazy, and I just need somebody else to see what I'm seeing. She was shaking her head, and she started the engine. Then she jumped back towards the passenger seat when Carrie slammed the paper against her window. Marvin Lightfoot, 68, fishing boat flipped, and he hit his head on a rock and drowned. The image of Marvin was plastered on her window in black and white, holding his rod and tackle box, smiling, with a boat hat on his head and waders on his feet. Angela screamed and threw the car into gear, peeling out of the parking lot as Carrie yelled a chant of, Remember Marvin! Remember Marvin! Chapter 6. Well, that could have gone better, Carrie said to himself as he drove towards his house, holding a cigarette out the window. He took a long drag, then coughed out the words, Remember Marvin, while laughing. I'll be lucky if she doesn't call the police on me. He passed the gas station where he bought the pack of cigarettes the other night, wringing his hands along the steering wheel. Who the fuck is going to believe me? He looked at his dash clock, which read 8:58, which really meant 7:58. He hadn't changed it since it fell back, and now he figured he'd just wait until it sprung forward into the correct time. It would be sometime around midday in Egypt, assuming Margie was still over there. She was a safe bet, too far away to have him committed if she decided he was loony. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and he found himself telling her he had a random story to run by her, which could really mean anything. It would be right up her alley with that kind of tagline. Carrie's stomach was rumbling when he arrived home. He tossed his coat on the couch, noticing the indents from him and Angela the night before. It had been a long time since he wasn't alone in the house. Despite their subject matter, it felt great to share the room with someone again. Being able to have full control of the TV, eat what you want for dinner, and fart as loud as you can with no repercussions lost its novelty after a short time. If he was honest, the loneliness more than anything drove him to that cliffside. He got so used to companionship, he found himself talking to the fish after a while, just to hear a human voice aloud. And now, even they were out of the picture. He dug through his cupboards for something edible and settled for a piece of toast before heading into his bedroom. The past 24 hours drained him. He glanced at the paper with Marvin Lightfoot's picture on it, shook his head, then laid it on his pillow. Somehow he was at ease, knowing he had proof this time. Within minutes, Carrie was out cold. He slept like the dead, like Coach Dodgman, and almost like himself if things went differently. He was woken by his phone around 3, reaching for it with a sluggish hand, blinking a few times to let his eyes adjust to the bright screen. Margie, it read. He accepted the call, trying his best to sound awake. Hey, KK. I just got back to the hotel and saw I had a voicemail from you. What's this random story you've got to tell me? I've got a random story of my own for you. Oh, by all means, you start, said Carrie. I'm still a bit groggy. Okay, so remember that pilot I told you about a while back, John? Carrie tried to think of, but his brain wasn't firing on any cylinders yet. He flipped on a small lamp next to his bed to help speed up the process and felt the sting in his eyes. His blackout curtains had an orange glow about them. You might have to refresh me, Margie. The Puerto Rican one, that's all muscles and magic? I know I told you about him. Oh, yes, muscles and magic, said Carrie with a laugh. I remember that for sure. Shouldn't he be Juan, not John? He prefers John. He gets more jobs that way. The rich white clients who book our planes don't expect a guy named Juan to be flying a plane. Cleaning it, maybe, but not flying it. That's terrible. Terrible, but true. But also, not the point of the story. Back to the muscles and the magic. So we toured the Sphinx and pyramids yesterday. It was supposed to be me, John, and Ed, the co-pilot. But Ed got sick on some bad lamb or something and went back to the hotel to puke his guts out. So John and I did the tours, but when the guide turned away to point something out, he pinched my shoulder. So I pinched his arm. Then he pinched my thigh, and I pinched his butt. And he pinched my butt back, and I squealed, and I couldn't help myself. I slapped his arm, and the guy turned back to me and gave us that look that Mom used to. You know the one. Oh, yeah. So, our group is mainly old couples, and after the first pyramid, they kind of all look the same. We went back to the hotel in the middle of the day, and more than pinching went on. Lord. Shut up. Then, as I'm leaving John's room to get some clean clothes so we can go to dinner, I see Ed in the hall. He is pale as shit and clutching his ice bucket like a life preserver. Now, you probably remember Ed had a crush on me forever, but he's really just not my type. No muscles, no magic? Nope. So I'm standing in the hallway in just a towel. You know how small those hotel towels are. I only planned to go a few doors down to my room, but now I'm frozen, watching him watch me. I'm not sure what to say. He looks terrible, but you can see his brain is like freaking out because he's seeing me half naked. And he opens his mouth to talk and ends up just hurling again all over his ice and the bucket and the floor. Some of it splashes all the way on me because they have these fancy tiled marble looking hallways. Well, you know how I am with puke. I do. So I freak. I'm trying to wipe it off my leg, and in the process, I lose my towel. I had it tucked in the front, so when I bend over, it pops free, falls to the floor behind me. I gave him the full business, Carrie. Carrie was laughing from his end. This is a classic Margie story, and the best part was she'd just take it in stride and laugh at it, even halfway across the world. How did he like the show? Carrie asked. There was a short pause before she replied with a sad tone. He puked again. Carrie burst out, "Oh, Megs." Not the reaction you want when a guy sees you naked. He had food poisoning. I'm sure it wasn't. Still. You were just with John Juan pinching or whatever. Still. You haven't changed. What does that mean? You know, even with the whole flight crew drooling over you and you still want more. Margie scoffed. The whole flight crew, there's only 2 of them. And they both want you. What more do you want? For them not to puke. Good Lord, so what about John? He was in the shower. He had no clue this even happened. Still? Still, I don't need him knowing Ed saw me naked. He knows Ed has a thing for me. But you have a thing for John, not Ed, right? Yeah, but you know Puerto Rican guys. I do? The macho Latino thing, it's real. Anyway, so in case you forgot, I'm in Egypt. I didn't forget. Then you know that they are all about their women being modest, like hijabs all over the place, and some of them even cover their face. Gotcha. So you're standing naked in the hallway of this hotel. It's not just a hallway. There was a total view of the lobby from there. I saw a mother covering her children's eyes and everything. So I forget all about the puke, which was really hard. I grab my towel and wrap myself back up and move as fast as I can without losing my towel again. Shit, that's a pretty messed up day. Yeah, well, my poor friend Ed is still in the hall, covered in puke splatter. I'm still holding the bucket. I just couldn't do anything for him. I had to get back to the shower and get the puke off of me. Well, that's understandable, I guess. I still felt like such an asshole. Carrie rubbed his chin. He had no clue how he was going to segue into his story. He wasn't sure he'd bother at this point. So, when are you getting kicked out of Egypt? Margie laughed. Probably soon. Good thing we're leaving in the morning. I'd say so. Oh, Margie groaned. I've got to figure out how to get all this stuff back in my suitcase. Time to pack, huh? Can't you just toss it all in the plane? She was breathing harder and there was a zipping sound in the background. That's unprofessional, even though we're not like commercial or whatever. Okay. Well, it's good to talk to you. I got to get this done and sleep a bit. Yeah. John's not coming over for a nightcap? Also unprofessional, Carrie. Your rules make no sense. Good night, KK. Good night, Marge. Carrie hung up the phone and shook his head. Margie had always been the wanderlust of the family. She was always the interesting one while he sat back in their hometown, working at the factory, being old and married, or formerly married. He'd spent the rest of the afternoon trying to decide if he should call Angela, or at least text her and confirm he wasn't trying to be a weirdo, and that she wouldn't send the cops his way. In the end, he decided if the cops hadn't shown up yet, they probably weren't going to. Calling her might change that. Still, he hoped she'd be watching the evening news, because when it came on, he already knew whose name he was about to hear. The anchorman stared straight into the camera and delivered the line. Local fisherman, Marvin Lightfoot, was found dead this afternoon by a passerby who saw his boat flipped over in Bent Creek. The details went on, but Carrie heard all he needed to. He found himself staring at his phone, urging it to ring with Angela apologizing from the other end, telling him he wasn't crazy, but no call came. He was on his own with his crazy psychic newspaper. He went over to retrieve the copy from that morning, showing Mr. Lightfoot in his fishing gear, only this time it was blank. Carrie turned it over and realized the entire thing was blank, just newspaper minus the print. Huh? He said aloud. Maybe that's how it worked. Once the person died, they just faded away. He let out a cynical laugh, and he thought how true it was. But what could he do with this knowledge? Tell the police? How soon would they bring him in for questioning, knowing about all those deaths? What the hell was he even thinking? Had his depression created this whole situation just to keep his brain entertained, or to keep him from trying suicide again? It didn't matter to him. He just had to figure it out, and if he could do something about it. That's the end for now. Back in town next week, hopefully.